Welcome to the future. My name is Zach Gardner. I'm the chief architect at Jackie Holt Software. And about 3 to 4 months ago, I set off on a little bit of a journey. I wanted to find people with very strong opinions on generative AI. People that were not just talking the talk, so to speak, but also walking the walk. I went out, I scoured the internet, and I found a few people that I think might be interesting to be able to have, a really insightful conversation and maybe give a perspective that, maybe you hadn't considered before. The person I have with me today is Jackie Holt out of Denver, Colorado, if I remember right. She's a data scientist and has a perspective that, as a person in data that I typically probably would not have. So Jackie, thank you much for agreeing to be on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here. I'm Jackie Holt. I'm a data scientist with Propeller Consulting. And yeah, I'm here to discuss all things generative AI. And yes, you could say I have some strong opinions on some things. That would be accurate.
Good, strong opinions aren't bad. We need more of them in this world. So before we start, as a disclaimer, I always got to say it. I've said it enough. I think I can do it from memory. All the views and opinions expressed in this program are explicitly the views and opinions of the participants and in no way reflect either their organization, employer, or trade organizations that they are affiliated with. So now, with that out of the way, maybe start with, what are some of the things that you see as a data scientist, like really good use cases for generative AI? Is it reducing administrative load in healthcare? Is it improving physician burnout? Kind of where's your mind at in terms of all the things that have been coming out? Like, where do you get most excited about?
I think everyone's pretty familiar with, which is text. So that's written language outputs from, something like ChatGPT. Pretty much, probably most of your audience, I would imagine, has some sort of use case with this. Another one is code. So there's developers who are using generative AI to help with computer coding in a variety of programming languages. There's also audio. So these are like basically giving the model the ability to kind of talk at you about that text that's been written, for example. So think of a use case like troubleshooting support or technicians in the field. It's kind of like Siri, but with ChatGPT on the back end, kind of a use case like that. There's also images, video, and then 3D specialized image generation. So those are kind of all similar in that the video can be, generated from an image, and then you can make that something that was maybe 2D into 3D. So those are some of the use cases that are out, or some of the things that generative AI can be used for. And in the medical field, I'm not a doctor, I'm a data scientist, just to be clear. So some of these use cases that I've heard of, I may not have been directly involved in. I'm just aware of them because I'm interested in these things and go on to the various areas of the internet where these things are being discussed and worked on by others. So in some cases, I may have worked with some of these things. But so there's a bunch of different use cases, some of which are, I'll say, validated use cases. There's some that are early stage use cases, and there's some that are just conceptual. And I'll probably go on some rabbit holes about the conceptual piece because that's the part that I get the most interested about. So as far as addressing, say, for provider burnout, there's some things that are already validated use cases for this. And so one of those use cases is something like automated document processing, where the physician doesn't have to have that cognitive load of those document processing as a burden onto them. They can do more client-facing things that way. And then there's also patient screening and on-demand personal care. Like some of the use cases you may have seen yourself, where you go on and now there's a chat bot that maybe it's not hyper personalized yet, but it can at least answer some of your questions a little bit better than chatbots, say, from 3 years ago. So it might be a little bit better at that. It might be a little faster. It might be able to tap into some of your information, not all of it. There are HIPAA rules, of course, that are involved here, so that you do have to be cautious about what kind of information these things can have on you as a personal individual. I hope to see use cases in the future where we've ironed some of those things out and those can become hyper personalized. One use case that I think would be really interesting would be, this is kind of a hypothetical here, I don't know of anyone doing it yet, is an example of the client, or I should say the patient facing interface has the ability to, basically as you log into your portal, you can upload, say, for example, an image of a spot that you're worried about on your leg. And you're like, well, this is a little concerning. I'm going to go ahead and send this to my dermatologist. I sent them a picture, a year ago, and they take a picture every time I go in, but, I think it looks a little weirder than it did usually. So I'm just going to send them a message and then, wait to hear back if I should make an appointment or whatever. The physician side could then receive a generative AI kind of like case email in their inbox that says, well, John Smith wrote in, he's concerned about his uh, image on his of a mole on his, let's just say, right thigh. And, it can generate a case theoretically um, of, okay, so John Smith has been in 5 times in the last 5 years. We have images from 4 of those years. Additionally, he sent in this one today. Uh, Based on the clinic's model that they have available and the fact that we've been watching this progress, we think there's a 97% chance this is turned malignant. Recommend patient comes in for biopsy, and um, maybe that gets sent to the physician. On the admin side of that doctor's office, they could say, okay, here's some potential open slots scheduling wise, because there's a whole realm of things that could be automated generatively with the admin side of things. So that could help in scheduling. Then a doctor logs in, sees this, says, can send a message right away to staff saying, yes, schedule this person, or no, don't. And you could assign, a level of how quickly they should be seen depending on, what the concern is. Admin staff then sees, okay, doctor agrees patient should come in. Here's an auto-generated email ready to go to the patient portal with time slots that they can select. And then I log back in, I see these time slots, I select one, it automatically schedules me, and boom, I'm, hopefully in right away. So that would be an ideal use case that I'd love to see come out. I'm hoping within the next few years. I don't know anyone who's managed to pull anything like that off yet, but I think that would be a tremendously great way to reduce physician burnout and also the admin staff. It's not just the physicians that get burned out here. So there's a whole slew of people trying to help in the medical industry that get burnt out on doing some of these things that are repetitive and monotonous, and things that we can definitely speed up with generative AI.
Mhm. Yeah, I think being able to reduce the amount of just simplistic work that a lot of us do, I think is like the biggest boon that I see. I've always heard people that are worried about generative AI is out for our jobs, and it's like the truth of the matter is it's a tool, not unlike any other tool that we have. It is some things that it is really good at, and it is some things that it is not so good at. People are really good at empathy. They're really good at ethics. They're really, depending upon, unless you're like my kids, like being able to decide between, two moral outcomes, like one is good, one is bad. Well, I'm probably going to go for the good. Generative AI, it's not really designed to make those choices. And it's not even really designed, I would say, to give someone like the correct answer. Like one of the things that I've always had struggles with in talking with people is it's a probability. It's a statistical algorithm where what it's designed to do is give you like the most probable or optimize for the probability that what it is giving you is the most correct answer, like the most probable answer. But whether that is accurate, I've heard some people talk about things like hallucinations and some other things around generative AI. And it's like, well, you still always have to have a human at the end of the day when it comes to making life threatening or like life caring decisions. But it is a tool, especially in the workflow that you brought up, to be able to speed up like the intake of this hypothetical patient. Some of that could be done with generative AI over the phone or over text. The authoring of the emails, that is definitely something that, I don't know about you, like if I could give something that makes emails for me, like how maybe in isolation that would only stay like a minute or two, but in the aggregate, especially when you span it across like a large organization, those are some of the time savings that I think we're going to be able to reap the benefits of and be able to use that time more effectively to not just doom scroll through LinkedIn, but like to be able to optimize and be able to take that time back and be able to produce things that we otherwise might not have had the time to produce.
Right. Yeah, hallucinations are definitely continue to be a problem for these generative AI models. I don't see anything that's going to change that anytime in the near future, unfortunately. So you're right. In medical, especially, we need to be careful about these things. Like hallucinations are so prominent. That is one thing that if I were to go into help an office implement AI today, that would be like number one's like data governance, data privacy, training of people. And this isn't just in medical, but in any organization, that these hallucinations are very important to be able to vet. And like now it's kind of putting us humans in an interesting spot where um it's maybe not going to take our jobs away necessarily, but it's going to change what we're doing. So now maybe the chat bot is doing something on our behalf, but now someone has to vet that because we don't want these things going haywire. I'm sure you heard about the car dealership where they
Mm-mm.
let this chat bot kind of negotiate a car deal, and I think they ended up reversing it, but they basically accidentally sold a car for like $1 or something ridiculous because the chat bot was like given the ability to like have some legalese language where it was like, oh no, we're legally binding this. You were going to buy this, whatever car for $1. So those things obviously not a good example of a good example of what you should not do.
It's like the human was interacting with the chatbot, and the chatbot said something like, I have the legal authority to be able to set the price for this car, and they got them to negotiate it down to $1. And like, I mean, that might, I don't know if that's legally binding in a court of law, but it's definitely like an interesting use case where like at the end of the day, you probably want a human to come in, like maybe at the last minute,
Yeah.
before the metaphorical hands are shook.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a, funny example, and I think it wasn't legally binding, and I don't know what they ended up doing, and it was just crazy to me that, um there does need to be some exercise in judgment and some human vetting and some making sure things aren't hallucinating and going off the rails, especially in something like a medical industry where you are making life and death decisions. You don't want to just hand over complete autonomy to these chatbots. So, you do need to be careful. That's a lot of what I do is go in and kind of explain to people. Now you're in the place of a researcher slash librarian. Your job now looks different. Now you are in the position where you need to carefully vet what the chatbot has generated before it's seen by your client.
Mhm.
So that's a lot of what is happening right now as far as people who are actually using these things. A lot of vetting, a lot of research, a lot of kind of going back to critical thinking, because they generate text in such a way that they're so authoritative. And so because of that, you tend to believe them. It's like, well, it can't be wrong. It explained it so beautifully. It's like, no, no. It can be very wrong. You do need to actually like critically think about what it is generated and what it is saying, and is it, is the information it gave you factual, and can you back it up? Because it doesn't necessarily do that.
Hmm. Yeah, there were some interesting techniques that I have seen for at least reducing hallucinations that go along the lines of what you were talking about. It's just you have to make sure that the text that's going in, that you've done at least some sanitization on it to make sure that there's no sort of obvious ways for you to jailbreak. But then on the way out, you also have to do validation of what the large language model is producing to make sure that someone didn't find some clever way on the in to be able to sort of trick it and then give something that was going outbound. So that at least helps make sure that you're staying within at least the obvious rules and regulations. Um, I'm curious if you have any other like anything else that you found that's been interesting, like in your research that might help people. Maybe the average Chat GPT user like me. Is there some different way that I could like talk to it that gives me like better results, or is it just just kind of got to learn how to use this tool?
Well, I mean, there are, prompts you can go out there on the internet and find. Personally, I find that it's kind of just like iterating on a Google search. It's like a super Google search. You're just iterating on it. Yeah, you can always, give some more context when you want it to act a certain way. Um, that's part of, what I go in and train on is some use cases usually specific to that business or org that we're going to be using this to create job descriptions or whatever, and so you can kind of use like, especially like ChatGPT, you can now do your own custom GPTs within there pretty easily. That's pretty accessible and anybody can do it. You don't have to be a data scientist. You can just hop on there if you have the appropriate license, of course, and create your own, job description bot. So you can provide it additional context from your own library of previous job descriptions, for example. So you can provide it a template, you can provide it some background on your organization, you can provide it as much context as you want, really. And anything you can provide it will no doubt assist and giving you kind of what you're looking for. And then that reduces the burden on, the human in the loop where, then maybe it's like 95% of the way there. And then I can go back in and put any specific details that you wouldn't want to put into the model. Like you don't want to put names and social security numbers,
Mm-hmm.
etc. in
Mm-hmm.
these. So don't put any of that in there, but you can get most of the way there. And then your job as the human is to vet anything it's said. Yes, this is valid for my org. Yes, here's the leveling, here's the salary, here's, whatever information needs to go in there now. And now that's, maybe saved me a couple hours. So
Mm-hmm.
huge productivity boost.
Yeah, having a sufficiently sized training data set is something that I've also heard is rather important. I mean, to kind of build off of your example, if you were to have your own custom GPT where you gave it 500 job descriptions and all of them were for an entry level software developer, and then you asked it, okay, now generate me what a senior level software developer is. I mean, it probably won't say no. They're not great at saying no, but it probably wouldn't give you the most accurate because it's not really like what it was trained on. That's not really in its knowledge sphere. Just as if you or I were to try to go out and learn something, if I only learn how to build chairs out of wood and then someone asked me to build a chair out of metal or to build a yacht out of, whatever it is yachts are made out of, it's like I wouldn't know how to do that. I haven't been properly trained on it. And when it comes to training, I mean, especially in healthcare, one of the things that I am cognizant of is, I probably have very different experiences than you, than our neighbor, than someone in California, or someone in, the inner city of New York. And if you don't have a large language model that has been appropriately trained on, people of all skin colors, people of all ethnic backgrounds, people of all religious heritages, like you might be building in sort of an implicit bias depending upon like how the data was trained. I'm curious if you have any other, just kind of like general recommendations, especially when it comes to, ensuring you have a proper data set. Like how big is too big, or what's too small, or is it just kind of a rule of thumb?
Yeah, so the data piece is really important. Not only do you need to have ample data, and I'm talking like terabytes of data, preferably. I don't know if you could have too much data at this point. The part of the reason why we're even talking about generative AI is because big data was so successful. We don't talk about it anymore because it was so successful that we don't need to. It's just kind of we take for granted that we have the ability to now have these massive data sets, and it's not like a problem like it was before. Um, and I kind of think the same thing will happen to generative AI. I don't know, like in 5 years from now, will we even be talking about it? I don't know, probably not, because we'll just take it as a given. We'll just be like, well, of course Microsoft Copilot can do that. Like if it broke, we would all go bonkers, just like as if Google went down today. If you can't Google anything, it'll probably be the same way in the future. So as far as like the data goes, there's a couple things. You do need quite a bit of data. Smaller orgs are struggling with this. We do a lot of assessments where we go in and kind of assess the state of the data, because not only do you need to have a pretty good amount of data, but you also need to have data in a good, clean data set. You can't just throw it just random garbage and expect these models to perform well. Like, so for example, if you have, let's say you have 20 different versions of your company handbook. Well, you don't want this model having access probably to all 20. You want to have it have the access to the most recent one, because if you have a chatbot, you've allowed use within your org for inside the company use, and you have someone inside the company asking, well, what is your maternity leave policy? You want it to pull up the most recent maternity leave policy. You don't want it to pull up a maternity policy from 20 versions ago. So you do need to make sure those data sets are clean and that you have ample data in some cases where I'm just going to go back to the medical model again. You want to have this is difficult, of course, but as bias free as you can make it data set. Say, for example, you have an algorithm that you're trying to determine, is this, malignant melanoma or not? Or if not, what is it? It could, I could also suggest, well, maybe it's not this, but it could be that. You need to have a wide variety of images available on different skin colors and skin types. And you also want to be able to make sure that, this is the part where it gets very tricky is um, bias looks different depending on who is looking at it and who you are. So, you also have to have, when you're cleaning these data sets for bias, not just in medical, but let's just say a generalized candidate search algorithm. Obviously, that would be a good example of that. I'm sure you've heard about the Amazon debacle where they fed all these resumes into their algorithm. This was a while back, and thankfully they
Oh,
shut
okay.
it off. So, guess who they popped out? Maybe not the most representative spectrum of folks. So they wisely turned it off. But when you're going through those things, you do need to have basically like a committee of different viewpoints when you're looking at the data as well, because you can't just depend on, Jackie, the data scientist, is alone responsible for making sure there's no bias and the data set is completely clean and there's no possible way that the generative AI can find anything weird going on in here. Um, that's just not true. So it requires vetting, requires cleaning the data, having it ready to go in the proper formats. There's also things like, do you have a vector database? Those things are going to be potentially necessary for your use case, and if you don't have those, you're not going to get very far in some cases. So there's a lot of things to consider.
And if I remember right, a vector database isn't that where you tokenize the input and then it produces a vector, which is like like a point and a direction, and you can use that to compare like how similar like two pieces of text are. Did I get it right, or am I?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
good.
that's generally correct. So as a human looking at like a vector database, it would just be total garbage and you'd be like, what is this?
Mhm.
So, but it makes sense to the computer because it can think in all these multiple ways and it'll look like gibberish to us, but you can basically give that information to an algorithm and it will figure out like, okay, here's your here's what we think is approximately what you meant and here's the interpretation of that. So yeah, those are really only for certain sub use for some use cases, not all. Certainly, you don't always have to have one, but in some cases you do. And the way you treat those data are going to be very different than you would treat a normal database.
Hmm. Gotcha. So I got that, and then the Amazon candidate search, and then you gave me another piece of homework too. So this has been good. I didn't realize I would be getting homework out of an interview that I am doing. So totally fine.
There'll
Um,
be a pop quiz later, so you better
yeah.
start studying.
Okay, hope not. So, you talk through some of the conceptual use cases. Some of the validated ones were some of the pieces of homework. I'm curious if you have any other validated or any other early stage use cases that that make you really excited. Anything that you've been thinking about?
Um, yeah, I mean, there's definitely I think probably some of the medical use cases still are kind of interesting. So like precision medicine therapies that are hopefully going to be some of those are validated already, but there's you know accelerated drug development and some imaging that'll hopefully come out that like imaging algorithms that can maybe better predict certain cancers, maybe predict Alzheimer's at an earlier stage. All these things will have to go through FDA approval before they get released, and so those are going to be delayed a little bit. But um, computer vision is really fascinating, and these algorithms can sometimes pick up on things that we cannot see, and we don't fully understand why. Like anyone who's played with Dolly kind of notices that it can do some kind of really interesting things, you know, and um, some of the use cases where we can maybe upload an image and maybe we can't see it, but there's something going on that the algorithm is like, hey, this person probably needs to be looked at carefully for potential, Alzheimer's, or, hopefully it's a case where no, this might be okay. We don't know yet. Those are all kind of being experimented, and the FDA is closely looking at some of the people that have come and brought forth some of those algorithms. But I think that's really exciting because, if you think about it, we haven't really been doing modern medicine that long. So we don't know a lot, and there's a lot of discoveries I think to be made. And as far as like, these models can now generate uh, potential therapies that would have taken us decades, if not thousands of years. It can run through these things and populate and like pick maybe 14 of the best potential candidates that we can go and now look at and kind of say, okay, are these things going to be viable? And if so, like let's start experimenting on our top three or whatever. So it has the potential to really modernize medicine in a way we've not ever seen before.
Mhm. I think I actually read about one of those accelerated drug developments recently. It was where it was able to, come up with some generative like protein structures and something like that that people just like unless you're thinking about it, you probably would have never come up with. But if you just have a generative algorithm, just kind of go and explore, and as long as you have your optimization function set up correctly to where it's like, oh, here's a match, that I just happened to come up with. I don't know if we would have discovered it. Yeah, to your point, any other way. That and precision medicine, being able to have medicine tailored to someone's genomics. I know that there's, at least I heard about it, at least like certain people of certain ethnic backgrounds don't do well with certain anesthesias. Like, it's crazy to think that, like, two people that look nearly similar could have completely different biomedical implications and reactions to the medicine. Like, I don't know. It's always kind of intrigued me as someone who, is sort of inside and, kind of orthogonal to medicine, just how complicated some of this stuff can be. So doctors are in their keep, being able to remember all this stuff in their head.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Looking forward to a time where hopefully doctors have the ability to have their own, hyper personalized chat GPTs where they can, have some discussions about a certain patient and, have that outcome come to me
Mhm.
as a patient, knowing that, one single physician would have the ability to pull a model that can have potentially maybe millions of other examples of someone like me that could then say, yes, this is going to be an issue. No, it's not. Here's some things we can do to prevent, with like Internet of Things, for example. How cool would it be if like my Apple Watch is able to translate some information to my doctor that, as they're watching my health progress through the years, it can alert to some situation that I wouldn't have necessarily thought about. Like, for example, like my dad had Parkinson's, and I always thought it would be super amazing if that could have caught it many decades beforehand. So, like, say, like it's able to Apple Watch even now it has I forget what it's called, but it's like it can detect if your walking is a little wobbly or not. I don't really know. I don't remember what they call it, but how interesting would it be to be able to transmit that information while you're not even like paying attention to it to a doctor, and all of a sudden it's like, this person is starting to have balance issues in their, if say their 40s, for example. What if we can intervene and start them on balance exercises right away, and so that they don't tend to progress as poorly? Things like that are the things that really excite me as use cases that I hope will continue to evolve and become reality.
Mhm. Yeah, no, me too. So to wrap this up, where can people go if they want to learn more about you, about your work, your company? Do you have a MySpace still? Does anyone have a MySpace anymore?
MySpace.
Oh. No, where can
I don't
people
know
go?
about a MySpace. Um, Yeah, Propeller Consulting, Jackie Holt at Propeller Consulting. People can always reach out. I don't mind. I love to talk with this stuff all day long. Um, Shout out to a Tech Eat. Are we allowed to do that? Tech Eat.
Yeah, Techie, definitely. That's
Tech
what brought
Eats.
us together. Small
It
world.
is. Shout out to Tech Eats Slack channel. So, and I think they're on LinkedIn. I'm on
Hmm.
LinkedIn. And yeah, so
No, very cool. Well, Jackie, you gave me some homework. Hopefully, I'll ace the follow-up test. Thank you very much for agreeing to be on the program.
no problem. Happy to be here.
And for everyone else that's still listening in, see you in the future.